Hi, everybody. My name is Matthias Jordan. I'm one of the senior managers working on Alexa Smart Home. You're in the repeat of ALX328, Smart Devices Everywhere. If this is not the room you thought you're in, now's a good time to decide that this is where you want to be. So I'm glad to see that we have a good audience. Today, we're going to talk a bit about the paradigm that we see in smart homes, smart devices, evolution of the industry, as well as how we see things stretch outside the home. Before we begin, I'm going to do a quick survey of the room to get a sense of who I'm talking to. How many of you have an Echo device? All right, that's pretty cool. All right, how many of you have actually built an Echo skill? Okay, how many of you have built an Echo smart home skill? Okay, all right, cool. So as we get started, I thought I'd share a video that one of my colleagues took this week at reInvent. This is actually from a hotel room. And if we can dim the lights a tiny bit, we're going to play the video.
Alexa, turn on the lights.
Okay.
Alexa, open the shades.
Okay.
Alexa, turn the thermostat to 70 degrees.
Auto set to 70.
Alexa, turn on the night light.
Okay.
Alexa, open the shears.
Okay.
Alexa, turn on Do Not Disturb.
Okay.
Alexa, open the lights.
Okay.
Ta-da. So when we think back, just so we're clear, that video was taken at the Wynn. Alexa is actually partnering with the Wynn. It's an example that you can see in some of the rooms there when you reserve a room. It actually shows the integration that we're doing between some of the home smart devices outside the smart home environment. So when I think about our industry, and all of us here are in the software industry or a variant of it, and I think back to my generation and how I grew up, I think back to the experiences I had. So when I was growing up, I started playing with one of those 286, 386 computers, and it was all GUI, and it was probably running DOS or something, right? And among my friends, I was definitely ahead of the curve. I was one of those people that really liked technology. But at some point, somebody came up with a GUI interface. And when it was Windows or Mac OS, I think we had a Mac Plus, but when GUI came out, it completely changed how people interacted with computers. It's changed the audience of people that could interact with computers. That was probably the first step function in how the computer industry changed for the consumer market. Now, if you think back to the people that use computers that are GUI, eventually the web came out. And when the web came out, then we had an explosion of usage. We had an explosion of the people that could actually use it, because the set of scenarios changed drastically. Completely different step function. Suddenly, you find yourself being able to browse for information, to email anybody, to reach out to anybody. Then came mobile. Mobile was another step function. It meant that whatever you could do before, you could now do anywhere you want. And with apps, you also saw an additional explosion of capabilities on the mobile devices. We believe that VUI, voice user interface, is an example of the next step function. We believe we're at the cusp of it. Or if you've got an Echo device and you really enjoy it, that you're actually in the middle of it, right? Now, what I'd like you to think about is also go back to all of these experiences and ask yourself, what really changed for you personally through each of those? Well, there was probably a magic moment, right? There was something magical when you started interacting with these, and it changed your perception of how a human interfaces with a computer. So the best example of that is the mobile generation actually brought the idea of touch and pinching. And I remember a few days ago, I was actually checking in one of the kiosks, and it's trying to take a picture of me, and there's this button on the screen, and my natural reaction was to try and hit the screen and touch the button. And it turns out it's not a touch screen, right? So I had to move the mouse. And it took me like 10, 15 seconds to realize that. Because by now, the idea of a touch screen is completely natural to me. So when you think about vui is a similar magic moment. The first time you talk to a computer, it completely changes your view. And if you've never seen it before, I encourage you to find a kid, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, that actually engages with Alexa. And you'll see that the way they interact with it is completely natural. They've got no thinking about it, right? So for us, we think of voice user interface as a step function. We think of it as a magical moment in user interfaces. And we think of it as a complete change upcoming in our industry. Now, at the same time, if you think back through each of these moments in our industry, at each and every one of them, I'm sure you can think back to some companies that took the launch forward. And some companies that kept on doing what they were doing, kind of the old guard, right? And some of them maybe eventually transitioned, and some of them may no longer be around. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is some of these transitions, what they look like, and how smart devices allows us to move forward and what you can do to be part of this generation. So I want to talk a tiny bit about human computing interactions. If you think about the way that you engage with anyone else, maybe in the room, your friends, your family, you don't just send them email, right? You talk with them, you look at them, you feel them, you hear them, you sense them. So all of these senses are part of the natural interaction between humans. And when we think about the direction that Alexa's going, we think voice, but we also think that what we really want is we want humans to be able to interact with computers in a way that is as natural as the way that humans interact with humans. Similarly, we see a day where the computer interacts with you in a way that is completely natural. The computer actually engages with you, and you think that you're engaging with a human, right? And so those are senses that a computer will have. That could be touch, it could be contact, it could be motion, a bunch of different things, right? So human-computer interactions with Alexa starts transitioning from using a keyboard, using a mouse, to being something that is completely natural to the user. And we see this as an evolution that's going to continue. For now, we believe, without a doubt, that voice represents the next major step function in computing. If I haven't convinced you yet, I'd like you to think a bit about it and actually go play with an Echo device, and you'll see it. Voice represents the next biggest revolution, the next biggest change, right? No learning for users, kids can interact with it directly, etc. Now, if you're a technology person, you're asking yourself, what exactly do I have to do to actually allow my customers to be able to actually engage with my product in this way? And that's where Alexa actually helps you as a developer. So Alexa, for us, is the brains behind the Echo family devices. Around 2014, we released the first generation Echo device. And since then, we've actually released a few more devices. So you see an Echo Show, it's the one with the screen. You see Echo Plus. I'll talk a bit more about it in a second. It's the big one in the center. You see the next generation Echo. I think it's also about $100. It's the gray one right next to the silver one, right? You see this Fire TVs. You see an Echo Dot, right? So this is our generation of our Echo family devices through the generation, but also showing different capabilities of Echo. Now it's actually got a screen, so you can actually see content of it. Now it's got a camera. Now it's got a bunch of different capabilities on it. And we see this as something that's going to continue to evolve. But users, when they engage with Alexa, don't just engage directly with the device. They engage with the capabilities that Alexa has. We call those Alexa skills. So Alexa, by default, has a number of capabilities. There are things like the weather, the news, information retrieval. And without a doubt, there are sets of capabilities that Amazon and Alexa have just not built. that someone else will actually go and develop for the customer. The same way that on a mobile device, you've got apps. So it's about expanding the customer experience. Skills is the first way by which you can actually go and expand your customer's reach into Alexa, how you can reach out to them, how you can provide them that additional capability. So here I'll tell you a personal history, because raise your hand if you're a developer, if you write code. Yeah, exactly, right? So I'm a developer by training, even though my title says manager nowadays, right? And I lived abroad for a few years, and the reason I worked in Alexa is because of what happened to me at that time. One day I woke up, and the place I lived had really bad air quality. So when I woke up in the morning, I asked myself, what exactly is the air quality outside? And you can open the blinds and you can look. You can take your phone and you can search on your phone. Or my reaction was to ask Alexa, Alexa, what's the air quality? And Alexa didn't know the answer. So I asked myself, I'm a bit of a geek. How long would it take me to actually code up this thing they call a skill? Like, how hard can it be? And I basically blocked a Saturday, and I sat down and I started reading about AWS. I'd never done any Lambdas, so I started reading about Lambdas. I'd never done Python either, or scraped their website. I was a C# guy before. But about 4 to 5 hours later, learned a ton of stuff. 4 to 5 hours later, I'm in my living room going, Alexa, ask my skill the air quality. And Alexa speaks to me. And it was literally, air quality was 198. It was literally the equivalent of hello world. And it was, as a developer, it was my magic moment, because it was so incredible to see a speaker, an Echo device, actually say something as a reaction to me as a human asking it a question. And so skills are that simple to get started. If you're a technology enthusiast, it's a few hours of work to get into it. It's very, very simple. And I encourage you to do it because it'll reaffirm to you how magical this experience of voice is. There is more, however, to the way we think of our platform and our system, right? There's a lot more to how we think of the world of Alexa. So we've talked a bit about skills. Skills are actually part of what we call the Alexa Skills Kit. The Skills Kit is a set of APIs and systems and documentation by which you can build skills. The second thing we talk about is the Alexa Voice Service. If you're interested in embedding Alexa into a device, like for example, a thermostat, a car, or maybe a TV or a watch, then the Alexa Voice Service is the way by which you're going to do that. Yesterday, we announced Alexa for Business. Alexa for Business is our sets of APIs and capabilities that allow you to actually take Alexa outside the home into a business environment, manage devices, and a bunch of other things I'm going to talk about a bit later on. So with all of that, you're well set up, and if you're not familiar with these things, I encourage you to go and dive into each and every one of them. But we're here today to talk about smart devices. So where do you get started for smart devices? Fancy animation. In the Alexa Skills Kit, you'll find 2 sets of API surfaces. One of them are called Custom Skills, and another one is called Smart Home Skills API. So earlier when I asked how many of you had built a skill, a lot of you raised your hand and said, well, yes, I have, and it was probably a custom skill, right? So what are the differences between the two of them? In a custom skill, you own the request that you want your skill to handle. You own the voice model. You own the definition of how the human is going to interact with you. And for us, since Alexa doesn't really know what you're going to want your skill to do, the user has to specify that they want to talk to you. So the user says, Alexa, asks my skill to flash the lights. Alexa, ask my skill, or whatever name you've got, what is the air quality? The second API we've got is a Smart Home Skills API. So in the Smart Home Skills API, we, Alexa, take care of defining what type of requests we can handle, what type of devices we support, what type of capabilities we've got. We take care of all of the voice model. And if you think international and different languages, we take care of the different languages as well, right? You, on the other hand, take care of exposing your devices to us. This allows us to have a more natural interaction with the user, right? Now the user is able to say things such as, Alexa, turn on the kitchen light. Alexa, lock the front door. Alexa, set the temperature to 70 degrees, right? Skill doesn't have to be mentioned because we know what devices you've got, we know what the device can do, we can handle the transition between what the user is asking and what your device can support, So going back to our chart, that's for the Access Skills Kit. The other thing we've got for smart devices is what we call the Amazon Smart Home Store. So we think monetization is important. And there was some announcement this week about skill monetization. In the context of smart devices, monetization also means selling your device, right? You've got a device, maybe you've got a manufacturer, you built it, you built a skill for it, you want to sell it. Amazon has a web page called the amazon.com/smarthome, where we actually showcase all of the devices that we believe work really well with Amazon, with Alexa. And we actually have a name for it. We call it the Works with Amazon Alexa program. So there's a certification program I'm going to talk about later, right? So the way you monetize, if you don't have your own distribution channel, right, and if you're interested, is to go through this effectively retail store, okay? If you look at the amazon.com/smarthome store, and if you look at all of the devices that we support today in our system for our users, there are over 1,000 devices today that are certified to work with Amazon Alexa. 1,000 devices. Some of them are smart home skills, some of them are custom skills. Either way, the user gets to use them, and they range the spectrum. There's everything from the lights and the switches and the thermostat to appliances, things like washer and dryer or kitchens or heating and cooling, right? So there's a whole set of all of these things that users can actually buy and purchase and install and use with Alexa, right? So recently we had an announcement about new capabilities that we've got in Smart Home for customers. And I'm going to walk you through those through those a bit before diving into what it means for you if you're a developer, for example. So the first announcement we had is we actually announced Echo Plus. Echo Plus is a next generation Echo. That's the same size as the previous one, all right? However, this one actually has a smart home hub inside, so it can connect directly to some devices. The second thing we announced is a GUI experience as well. So today, Alexa has a companion app. You can download it for iOS or for Android, right? And with it, nowadays, you can actually go and manage your devices. And we did this for two reasons. The first reason is because we heard from our customers. Some of them use voice, and some of them, they also sometimes want to be able to use a GUI experience. So we gave it to them. But a second reason we did it is because if you look at the home experience nowadays, if some of you have smart homes, then you know that you've got 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 different providers of smart home technologies in your home. And they each have their own app experience, their own way of engaging with the devices. So we recognize that each and every one of those players is going to have the most advanced experience possible. But sometimes what the user wants is a simple way to look at everything. And this is what this GUI experience does. It allows you to actually interact with a device from different providers without actually going through the unique experience of each of them. It lowers the friction. The third thing we announced is routines. And the best example of that is Alexa Good Night, which for me actually turns off the lights, closes some blinds, actually locks the door, right? And so these are examples of a routine that you can create. I'm told, how many of you have read Harry Potter? I see a few people, right? So I'm told that Alexa Lumos is very popular. It actually turns on the lights, if you set it up that way. It's something people like to do a lot. Right? The last thing we announced is what we call as a evolution of our group technology. So groups is the way by which you pull devices together so that you can target one group at a time, right? And we've added this notion of implicit targeting, which allows the user, the customer, to basically just say, Alexa, turn on the lights, and by knowing where the user is and which Echo device they're talking to, we can turn the lights on in the environment. So for me, what this means is that when I walk into my bedroom, instead of saying, Alexa, turn on the lights in the bedroom, I just have to say, Alexa, turn on the lights. And Alexa knows that I mean where I am right now, the bedroom, right? So it's definitely a friction reducer for our customers. So if we've announced this for our customers, what are we doing for developers? Our next generation API focuses on capability interfaces, where we've taken every device that we support and we've narrowed down to the specific capabilities of that device so that we can standardize it in a way that can be reused across different device types. So for example, if you've got a camera is show and hide camera feed. That's very specific, right? But if you've got a TV or light bulbs, then the experience is turn on and turn off. Right? So turn on and turn off is an example of a capability that you can apply to anything that's got power. Right? The same way that you have brightness level, color, power level, right? Set and query temperature. Set and query temperature is something that's interesting if you think back to the 1,000 appliances we had, which had some kitchen ones. Doesn't have to be heating and ventilation, it could be other things, right? Same thing for adjust channel, adjust volume, playback. So today, these are the list of all of the capability interface that we support. And the challenge I've got for you is to ask yourself, if you actually build, manufacture, release smart devices, right, of some form or another, is what could you build as an integration with Alexa using these capabilities? And of course, in time, we'll add more capabilities, but when you look at those, can you actually use the power level controller for something else than the volume or something else than brightness? Probably. You can probably do that, right? So as you walk out this room later on, I'd like you to really think through how can you use these capability interfaces that we've got, which sometimes we call primitives, as a way of exposing your devices to Alexa in a way that's very natural for us through the Smart Home Skills API. Now, all of these capability interfaces, they've got fancy names, right? But at the end of the day, they're basically a JSON, right? And so if you think of the way that you pass messages with Alexa or any web development these days or REST API, then it's effectively a JSON. And if you wanted to support set the thermostat to 20 Celsius, then as part of the message we send to you, you would receive this little message that says payload, target set point, value 20 Celsius, right? And if you support that, you would say, yes, I support it, and that's it. So the API itself is also very, very simple for you to use as a developer. The next thing we did is we added display categories. It turns out if you need a GUI, right, or a multimodal experience, right, you want to be able to represent to the user what type of device a user is, right? So here, you as a developer have the choice of which display type you actually want to use, and these are some of the icons that are actually used to represent that. So the user gets to see how you want to present your device to them. And we've seen some interesting devices. There are devices that are smoke detectors with a motion detector, an alarm, and a speaker embedded. So that raises an interesting question as to how do you want us to represent that device to the user. So in this list right now, you can see camera, you can see thermostat, you can see light bulb, you can see switch, you can see TV, speaker, lock, power outlet, I think, and then I believe there's a sensor somewhere in there. So let's take a second to talk a bit about what does it look like to actually, for the user to have a request actually flow through smart home, and how does this differ a bit from some of the other skills that you maybe have seen for Alexa? So let's assume that you have an Echo device, or maybe the companion app, right? It's your Alexa application and devices, and the user engages with it. The user comes up with another one. It's like, Alexa, turn on the light, right? So the first thing that's going to happen is clearly the device is at home, and that request is going to be taken. And if you look at an Echo device, when you say Alexa, the ring turns blue, and then you speak to it, and when you finish talking, eventually it stops. All of the message is taken, sent to the cloud, and then gets processed. So it's pretty straightforward, right? The message will actually fly all the way to the Amazon clouds. It'll enter the Alexa systems. It'll make its way to the Alexa smart home part. Now, you said, Alexa, turn on the lights. So Alexa is asking herself, what exactly do you mean? There's speech recognition. She recognizes the intent afterwards, natural language understanding. She recognizes the intent, turn on. So turn on is one of those power things, turn on, turn off, right? And so she goes, oh, turn on, turn off. That's probably a smart home thing, right? So she goes to smart home and she says, smart home, can you turn on, turn off this thing, right? And then you happen to have said the light, so we know the appliance name is the light. So knowing this information, Alexa starts looking at the user profile and saying, well, does this user have a light? Yes, this user has a light. The name is called the light, right? So let's take that and actually send a message to the smart home skills adapter that's actually on the AWS side for that developer. So you as a developer get to build a Lambda as part of registering your skill with Alexa. And we'll send a message over saying, someone has asked, this goes back to the JSON, someone has asked that you go and turn on this particular light bulb. Now, having received this on the AWS side, you're going to reach out to your device cloud, and from your device cloud, you're going to actually send a directive down to the device itself, right? How you send the directive from the device cloud to your device is up to you. Okay? So this is a very simple smart home request flow. When you confirm that you've actually turned on the device, the message will go back. And then depending on the text-to-speech response we've got, we'll say OK, or we'll say locking the door, or we'll say a few different things. But it turns out that we've been at this for a few years now, and we've learned a few things along the way. We've learned that not every smart device is equal. Some smart devices have some unique characteristics, because it turns out that they live in the physical world. They're not just a chunk of code. So a good example of that are door locks. Door locks are a mechanical device. Then when you say, Alexa, lock the door, there's a motor that's going to turn a bolt, and the bolt is going to go out, and it's going to try and enter the door frame somewhere. And it turns out that door frames throughout the world, they're definitely not as well standardized, as well built as the software that each and every one of us writes. Right? So on a regular basis, the door bolt will try to come out, the door won't be aligned, it won't come out correctly, the motor will bring it back in, try again, try again, try again. And then if it turns out that you live in a cold climate, then maybe the motor's got problems. And if it turns out the battery is low, then the motor's got even more problems. So in total, yeah, a smart lock, often they'll take 40 seconds, 50 seconds, right? Depending on where you are in the physical world, right? So that's a problem. It means that for 40 to 50 seconds, there's a connection open between our cloud and your cloud, basically saying, hey, we've asked you to lock the door. And if you imagine Alexa scaling to like thousands, millions of users, then something is bound to break. So one of the things we recently added is this idea that you can actually send us a completion message asynchronously. Right? We call this async responses. All that happens is that when we send a directive to you and we say lock the door, you say, OK, I got it. And then at some point in the future, you come back to us through a separate channel that you've established yourself, saying, OK, this message you asked me earlier, I've completed it. The case of lock the door is interesting because it's very, very important to the user. This is another thing you realize. As a user, if you say turn on the lights, you expect the lights to turn on. That's all you want. And you're maybe even in the room looking at the light bulb. But if you think about a door lock, when you say lock the door, you might not be next to the door. You might be in your bedroom. And frankly, you don't want to know that the door maybe was locked. You actually want to know if it succeeded or not. Because if it turns out that the motor couldn't get the bolt out and the door did not lock, you're probably going to get up, walk down to your front door, and actually lock it yourself. Right? So this notion as part of this human-computer interaction that the completion is important, it actually varies by device. So different devices, different smart devices have different characteristics. Right? And this actually flows all the way to the API that we've got for you. The second thing we added is we added this notion of proactive state updates. And we added a cache. So nowadays in Alexa, there is a cache of all of the devices that a user has and the state of those devices. And our request of you is that when something happens in the physical world with a device, even if the user has not asked for it, send us a message saying, yeah, that door lock, it just got unlocked. Right? That way we actually in the cache know what the physical state of the device is at any moment of time. And the biggest advantage for all of us in this room is that any query that the user does only hits the cache. And you'd be surprised how often, whether it be in the GUI or by voice interaction, how often the user tries to do something that they just want to know what's the status, right? And there's a latency gain in actually not having to reach your cloud, in addition to the bandwidth savings and whatever, right? Of not reaching your cloud and arguably not going to the physical device. So proactive state updates are a mechanism by which you inform us of what's actually happening to the physical world, to the physical device. We take that, we cache that, and when the user engages with us, we just provide the answer immediately. So how does all of this work if you want to get started? By the end of this presentation, I will have shown you some recommendation of other talks you can attend. We had one called ALX328 that was actually a workshop. The material is online. If you want to build your own smart home skill, it's the best way to get started. We had another one, ALX327, tips for how to run a backend and how to develop smart home skills. Again, same concept. If you've never done it and you want to learn, it's a great talk that you can actually go and watch that will actually show you all of the content and teach you a lot of things. So over the next 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to go through a very simple example, about 4, maybe 5 steps, maybe 6, to kind of get you started, but I'm not going to pretend to give you in the next 10 minutes a full lesson on how to build your own smart home skill. So let's say you've got something interesting. You've got a grill. Now, I happen to have a grill at home, and I've been looking forward to the day that I can just say, Alexa, set the grill to 400 Fahrenheit so I can cook a steak on the grill. Right? So maybe as a device manufacturer, you've got a grill that is app-enabled. Those are pretty popular, I'm told. And it's got a cooking thermometer in it. And you're asking yourself, how can I take this product that is app-enabled and make it Alexa-enabled? Right? It's going to be a quick challenge. Right? So the first thing you need, it needs to be internet connected. It turns out that if your smart device doesn't speak to the internet, we can't speak to it. Right? So you're going to have a device that's connected to the cloud somehow. And then you're going to need to use AWS because a lot of what we do in Alexa talks directly to AWS. We've got some good documentation to get you started. So you'll go to developer.amazon.com/alexa/smarthome. And what you'll learn if you actually go through this documentation there is that you really basically need to write yourself a Lambda. So I'm assuming how many of you are familiar with Lambdas? Okay, all right. I saw a few hands not raise up, so you should imagine that a Lambda is basically a serverless compute. It's a chunk of code that you write. It is hosted by Amazon, and then it gets instantiated whenever there's a request that hits a particular URI, right? So when a request comes in, AWS says, oh, this is for this Lambda, spins up the Lambda, runs the Lambda, returns the answer back, okay? You don't need to manage machines, as an example. Gross simplification, but accurate. So you're going to need to go and create yourself a Lambda. This Lambda is going to be your backend. It's going to be the way by which you're going to receive all of the JSON requests that we're going to send to you. It's going to be the way by which you're also going to advertise to us what devices your user has. So there's some complexities there. There's things such as authentications, device discovery, handling requests, asynchronous responses, proactive state updates. All of that nuance, all of that complexity, it actually starts with a Lambda, right? And again, ALX328 has got a great starting kit to get you started with all the documentation. You can take the code, it's on GitHub, and you can just copy it and start running with it if you want. Okay? So you build yourself a Lambda. This is actually your server side. And then you're going to want to connect this to Alexa. So the way you connect this to Alexa is by registering a skill. And so if you've ever built an app, this is a bit similar. You're actually going to go to the Alexa side, and you're going on the Alexa side to say, I want to create a skill, and I want to onboard some skill information about it, right? So when you do that, you're going to have to tell us this is a smart home skill, and you're going to start defining the contract between the Lambda and us, right? So as you onboard your skill, as you set up your skill, you're going to have to register an account, add your skill name, developer, local information, link to the Lambda. So you're going to have to tell the skill information page what the Lambda URI is, right? You're going to have to register your personal devices for testing. So you can take one of your own Echo devices and say, I want to use this to do my testing, right? And eventually you're going to submit, and there is a verification process by which we actually take that. That was 5 steps. Sounds a bit complex. Maybe I skipped some details. I'll tell you that the workshop was 2 hours and a half, and by the time we were done, people were able to say, Alexa, turn on the light, with a skill that did within themselves. So again, it's about a few hours of work to get this started. Okay? Now, once you actually have your skill, we talked a bit earlier about how maybe you actually want to sell your devices. So there's a part that's software, the skill, but these are smart devices. They're physical devices, right? And so for that, we've got the Works with Amazon Alexa program. The Works with Amazon Alexa program is a set of test plans, policy, certification mechanisms for specific devices. Somebody has sat down and asked themselves, what does a light bulb, a smart light bulb that want to work with Alexa, what does it do well, right? What are the requirements of it? And again, if you think back to the door lock, an example would be, well, if the bolt didn't come out, it should really send an error message so that we know that the bolt didn't come out. Right? So it's all the very basic things to ensure that the end user, the end customer, has a great experience with the smart device that you've got. Okay? And if you go through the certification process, we will eventually give you a badge. We call this the Works with Amazon Alexa badge, right? And this badge will actually show up on the retail site. So you've got an example here. Amazon certified works with Alexa. And if you go to the smart home store, you'll also find that there's this much bigger logo you can see here that users can see, customers can see, that actually says this product is known to actually work really well with Alexa, right? So it's a contract between you and us that we verify that your product actually behaves in the right way from an API perspective, from a physical perspective, from a behaviors, such that the customer wins at the end. If you want to take it to a new country, I'll talk about this in a second. Alexa today exists in a few different countries. But if you're a device manufacturer and you've got a skill, take it to a new country. It's pretty straightforward. You go back into the skill. You change a few settings. If you've built this as a smart home skill, remember that we take care of the voice model, the languages, so you pretty much don't have to do anything, right? Now, granted, if you're selling your device in a different part of the world, maybe it's a different AWS data center, different region, so maybe you're going to have to set up your Lambdas in a different region as well, right? But generally speaking, a smart home skill supporting a different locale, a different region, is fairly straightforward. It's as simple as opening the portal and doing some changes settings. So let's take a second to talk a bit about what Alexa does up to now. This is Alexa. When we started doing smart home devices, we focused on a few devices. We did light bulbs, we did thermostats, HVAC, we did locks, we did cameras. You can imagine in time we'll do many, many more, right? And then when we talk about locales, I'm going to zoom through them, US, Canada, UK, DE. Somebody made this a painful slide. Here we go. Today we support US, UK, DE, India, Japan, Canada. Canada was the latest one to be released. Earlier this week, we announced a few more countries, right? And again, you can imagine us entering more countries in the future. That should not be surprising, okay? But all of this is focused in the home. So I want to shift our conversation a bit, and I want to start talking about other things. Places. So today we started by saying DIYs, people that are a bit more advanced, experts, users, power users, that actually want to take smart home devices and do something really cool. They're going to assemble it themselves, right? Eventually, we moved into smart homes, and now there's a longer tail of users, maybe smart home beginners, right? And we have kits. For example, if you look at the Echo Plus, it actually comes as a bundle with a light bulb, if you want, right? But we're also looking at other places. So for example, we're looking at hotels. I started off by showing you a video of the Win, right? So what does this really mean for us? Well, let's go back to this example of the magic moment for a second, right? These are step functions, right? This is a transformation in the industry. And we started with this notion of character mode and GUI and web and mobile and VUI. And when you start thinking about VUI and you think about the home, you ask yourself, where else exactly could this happen? So here I want to take a second and tell you a story, because we tend to underestimate ambient intelligence and this notion of VUI interface. And so I have a niece, and my niece is about 4 years old. And her parents have decided that for the holidays, they're going to travel to a very warm climate. And it turns out that in this very, very warm climate, they don't have chimneys, or at least she saw pictures online that didn't seem to be chimneys. And so the other day, she was very, very stressed. She's like, oh, how is Santa Claus going to come into the house? Right? I mean, like, we can't go. Like, we have to stay, because she actually lives in Montreal, very cold. There are chimneys, right? She says, but we can't go. Santa Claus. And so someone, a family member, had to sit down with her and explain to her that it's okay. The place they're going, Santa Claus goes, because nowadays Santa Claus is very, very modern, right? He's very, very much up to date on technology. And Santa Claus, he does this thing with, and I believe the expression here was Alexa, but don't quote me. Santa Claus talks with Alexa, and Alexa, she can actually unlock your door, right? Now, we actually don't do that. But that's not the punchline of the story. The punchline of the story is that the little girl, she basically said, oh, that makes so much more sense. Like the chimneys, like I didn't really think chimneys made sense, but like Alexa. And it turns out that in her generation, Alexa is completely natural. Like, it didn't faze her, it didn't surprise her, this idea that something like Alexa could control and affect the physical world in this way. Right? And that's because, of course, at home they've got an Echo device and she's engaged with it and she's used it and all of her friends have. But consider this generation as they age. They're going to expect Alexa to be elsewhere than just the home, right? And as you start thinking outside the home, how are you going to do that? So this week we announced Alexa for Business. Alexa for Business brings the convenience of voice interfaces to beyond the home. That's effectively what it does. Looking for a picture? Okay. So I want you to ask yourself a bit. With Alexa for Business, we can help you go to a few different places. And would it make sense in a hotel? Well, we already talked about the Win. Makes a lot of sense. How about factory floors where people work? That would make sense. I could imagine Alexa one day being there, like voice interfaces there, right? Anywhere else? Well, actually, if you follow the news, there's a lot of sports teams that actually have started putting Alexa in suites, right? Some of the fancy suites. So it's very popular with football groups, right? And then you can also imagine nursing homes. So it turns out that nursing homes are also an environment where we're seeing Alexa being used. It's also popular in that context. So how does Alexa for Business help you with that? What Alexa for Business does is she actually allows you to do group management of your devices, right? You have a bulk setup tool, centralized management through an AWS console, settings of profiles, skills groups, control over devices. So imagine you're the Win, imagine you're a corporation, imagine you're a stadium, imagine you've got Alexa devices, Echo devices throughout your property, right? You don't want to have to go through each and every one of them and manage them individually. Alexa for Business actually helps you here by managing all of these devices for you the same way that you would manage a fleet of other types of devices. Okay? So when you start thinking about smart devices everywhere, I want you to consider that devices can take the form of a light bulb or the form of a thermostat with Alexa embedded in it. Right? They today exist in a number of different countries. Right? They today are in the home. And with Alexa for Business and with some work on your part, you can actually take all of that outside the home to a different environment. You as a developer have the ability to do that. We have a few resources that you can actually look at to go and learn more about Alexa. But between Alexa for Business and some of the next generation API that we've got, you have all of the capabilities possible to actually ensure that this step function of voice interface actually goes through properly, right? And if you think back again to this generation of old guard, this concept of old guard companies that struggle to go from GUI to web or from web to mobile, right? Then we're at the point of this transition. We're at the point of this step function, right? So this talk was meant to be an introduction to everything that we're doing at Alexa in the smart home world with smart devices. But between this talk and some of the additional resources we've got, hopefully you've got all of the information you need to get started taking smart devices actually outside the home. So again, ALX328, how to build a backend for Alexa smart home skill. All of the material is online, GitHub. If you want to go and write yourself a smart home skill, you can get started. ALX327, Alexa smart home, tips and tricks on how to actually build a proper skill and how to deploy it. ALX328 is this talk. The slides are going to be available on SlideShare as well as on YouTube. The recording itself will be on YouTube. And then finally, BAP308, which is the Alexa for Business talk about deploying and managing voice skills in your organization with Alexa for Business. With that, I hope you've enjoyed the talk. A few of us are actually on the side over there if you've got questions, but I wish you a good end to reInvent. Thank you.